Hello, everybody. This is Aaron Sampson.
And Ryan Schubert.
And we just checked out the Xbox One press conference. And
Hey. I already have an Xbox One.
You do?
Yes.
Is it the first one that you own?
It came before the 360.
Well, I was a little bit worried it was going to be the Xbox Infinity No Backsies Plus One. So this is better than that.
Yeah, maybe.
The one referring to like the one thing that's going to be in your living room with everything plugged into it.
Without backwards compatibility, it's not going to be the one thing plugged into my living room.
It's going to be like the third or fourth thing plugged in.
I'm glad they added a Blu-ray player.
Yeah. What we wanted to focus on today is what the Xbox One press conference had for shooter fans. For the actual... Because, by the way, this thing also plays games.
It plays video games. It's strictly a rumor right now, but we're hoping at E3 that will come true. So
let's start with some of the more hardware aspects of this. And by hardware, what I actually mean is the controller.
Looking at the gamepad.
So this is the thing that you hold in your hands that you play games with, and they changed it, which, you mentioned you were a little bit concerned about.
I am a little bit concerned. I kind of feel like that if you're going to be using a gamepad, at least as far as I've experienced in all of my 25, 30 years of video gaming, is that the Xbox 360 controller is the best.
I would actually agree. In terms of gamepad controllers, I think it's one of the most solid that I've played with. I mean, and by solid, I mean actually solid. I've dropped that thing like 10 times. But it also has, really good separation of like the triggers and the shoulder pads and
the analogs.
Yeah, and it very naturally is it's an extension of what you want to do, especially when you have to manage a lot of things in a game. And,
as a shooter fan, that sort of like pseudo pistol grip that you get out of it.
It's good. It feels like you're holding a gun.
It feels good, yeah.
So some of the things that they've changed on the new Xbox controller, some of these things I think are interesting. Some of these things may be unnecessary. One of them, the first one is the D-pad. Apparently people say, and I don't think either of us are big fighting game fans.
Right.
So maybe it wasn't as important. But the D-pad is now sunken in and it's not on the ball.
Right.
So they're claiming that gives you more precise D-pad control.
Which, it's a bit weird, right? Because some of those newer 360s, like the game-themed ones, like the Call of Duty and the Gears of War and all that, didn't they have a weird D-pad as well?
I think pretty much all the Pro controllers were inferior to the actual 360 controller. So they changed that. The proprietary port in the bottom now supports 5.1, but being proprietary, you're probably going to have to go and buy some new headsets.
I got to replace my Turtle Beaches.
So I guess save some monies for when that happens. One of the more interesting things that it has rumble triggers now. So the left and right triggers, I guess, can rumble independently.
That is very strange.
I think that rumble is probably one of the most underlooked advances in gaming. It gives you the sensation that things are happening in games without you consciously really knowing it.
And especially for shooters, it does add an extra punch to firing a weapon, and the rumble will be different depending on the type of weapon you're using and the rate of fire, and that has affected me ever since we got the rumble pack for the N64.
Yeah, I remember that thing.
That really changed the experience of playing a shooter for me. And as much as I admit that I prefer the performance of a PC, there's just one element that I always love about playing on console.
Yeah, I think the rumble triggers is a very positive thing. I mean, to me, you can't get enough of different types of feedback, tactile feedback when you're playing a game. And developers having the ability to communicate more things to you is always a positive.
Yes.
The next thing, this is what I'm concerned about, so we're just randomly going down this list. The battery pack is now flush. So apparently they wanted to get it out of the way, which I never thought was a problem.
I absolutely never had a problem with the battery pack.
But when you look at the back of the new controller, it doesn't look like you can swap it out very quickly. And I have definitely run out of juice on my controller many times.
If you play shooters on consoles, you have had your batteries die in the middle of a match before, and online multiplayer, and you can't pause that shit.
I mean, you literally need to be able to drop that thing out like a clip and snap another battery in there so you don't die. And from what
you got to reload in a hurry.
You got to reload that battery. And from what I'm looking at on this controller, I don't think you're going to be able to do that unless they haven't.
Actually, that is concerning.
Yeah.
Honestly, if they don't, I mean, I'm all for at least the environmental side of it. I mean, I use rechargeable batteries because I realized at a certain point that I was, eating up enough AA batteries to power a small nation. So I switched over to rechargeable. But
I passionately hate AA batteries in things that need to be rechargeable. So we'll see. I mean, again, this is very early. It's based off of the shots that they showed today. Maybe this thing will come with a charging pad. That's entirely speculation on my part.
Right.
But I'm concerned about this not being able to quick swap out mid-match because that has happened to me many times.
So many times.
So the next one, the classic start select buttons have been replaced by menu and view buttons.
Now I'm guessing the quote-unquote replacement is mostly cosmetic.
Yeah, I mean start and select haven't been used as start and select for a long time.
It's not like say the share button we've seen on the PS4 controller, which I mean, I'm assuming games will utilize that for other purposes if Sony allows it.
And they did say in this press conference that the Xbox One will actually have the same share feature. Whether it's tied to those buttons, I'm not sure, but that's a good thing for gamers, I think. Being able to share your footage online, something that we do with professional equipment all the time, but that puts that power into the average gamer's hands without them having to pay for extra equipment.
That's one of those things that I think we're just going to have to wait and see how well it's actually utilized. A lot of the stuff that we saw, I think, in the press conference, not really necessarily shooter specific, but there's a lot of stuff that's sort of like, I need to see that in action.
These are things that
to believe that it actually works.
Yeah, developers could use these things, potentially. Right. So let's talk about some of the other things that were said in this press conference, the goods, the sort of iffies, and the bads. On the good side, it was mentioned that there's more servers available, and that means higher player counts, which is good for everybody.
That's hugely good news. I mean, I hope that what that means is that the player count will be improved for console, rather than meaning we can sell it to more people. I'm hoping that means an upgrade. And if that's the case, then that's good news.
And particularly, you and I are big Battlefield fans, and we've wanted higher player counts. I think the Battlefield 3 maps on console always felt a little underpopulated. Like, they needed at least one more squad per side in those matches.
And, without knowing for certain, what I would hope is that what it means is that this next generation can push PC forward as well. The idea of consoles catching up to PC is kind of almost not enough to impress me.
Yeah.
It's like, so now we get to 64 players. On PC, like Arma, you can have, a couple hundred?
It's a very large player count. I mean, the question is, like, traditionally consoles would jump ahead of mid-range PCs a little bit, and then the PCs would catch up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It seems like this time around it might not even be doing that. We'll just have to see.
Yeah, I was thinking about that with the RAM. I'm like, 8 gigs of RAM.
Yeah.
My work Mac has 16.
PCs in terms of raw computing power at mid-range may already be advanced of these consoles. So,
right.
I mean, there's other factors such as developers are developing for fixed architecture on these things, so they can push them further than they can push PCs. If they had to develop for the same, there is no standard set on PCs, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
So they always have to play more cautious.
Right.
So yeah, that was it for the actual hardware part of it that I think affects gamers.
Yeah.
The snap feature, I think for people who are shooter fans, especially multiplayer shooter fans, the snap feature is less relevant because you can't pause your game.
The snap feature will be interesting if it works well enough with some of your other online features.
And just to clarify, the snap feature is basically you can have TV going, you can have your game going, you can have the internet going, and you can instantly go between them without any sort of loading screen.
I'm sort of curious to see whether that snap feature, which is like that third of the screen gets taken over, whether that's just sort of like a built-in app or whether that has some customization. Because personally, I can see a use for it insofar as like if I'm between matches in Battlefield, I can bring up Battle Log and look at my stats, and then when the match begins, chuck that off the screen. That's cool if it works like that. If it's just like, it brings up Bing for me.
Yeah.
Good. I got Internet Explorer on the side of my screen.
So if you're in a multiplayer match, it really won't have much use for you. I mean, unless there's a picture-in-picture feature, which again, speculation. They didn't actually say that.
I mean, not in an active multiplayer match, but again, I think between matches you've got something to work with.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And obviously, you can switch to the Price is Right if you're tired of your match. If you're playing Call of Duty and you're playing Search and Destroy and you're out for the next 3 minutes.
Let's go ahead and talk about, though, the only shooter that they showed at any length in this press conference, which was Call of Duty Ghosts.
They closed it out with Ghosts, in fact.
So the thing that...
It's got dogs.
Yeah.
It's got a dog that you love in it.
Which honestly is something that has been done in games before.
Yeah, okay, so I don't want to like crap all over their presentation, but just to get a little annoyance out of the way, they're talking like, hey, we're bringing you an all new experience, and it's like, what part of it is all new?
So yeah, let's talk about the new part, which
let's
is something.
Talk about the new stuff.
Which is this. So dynamic maps. I'm just gonna throw this out there.
That I'm excited about.
This was the one thing as a shooter fan that I got excited about in this press conference.
Yeah, player controlled events and dynamic events, or dynamic environments.
And they were talking about it in terms of like rerouting the map, which I think shooters really need right now, because in this past generation, I feel like we've taken bullets coming out of guns about as far as they can possibly go.
All of the customization, all of the...
I mean, I really don't think there's much more room for firearms in these games. And I think what they really needed to focus on, which I'm excited about and they announced, was maps that don't just sit still for you anymore. They actually, areas will flood, there'll be earthquakes, players can drop logs, like things that physically change the tactics on the map.
Yeah.
They talked about dynamic smoke. They talked about... we saw some shots of destruction. They could have come from single player, so we'll have to see if that actually works its way into multiplayer. But, we want to see this taken to its ultimate conclusion in this generation of gaming. Like, for example, fighting on a ship that's sinking and listing and, doing all kinds of crazy stuff while you're in it, or maybe like something real crazy would be fighting up a vertical building, and then when it takes enough damage, the building falls over, and now you're fighting through the building horizontally, or just maps that...
Yeah, I mean, it felt like we were beginning to get there with Battlefield's destruction in Bad Company, or Bad Company 2.
And then the industry sort of went away from that. Maybe it might have just been pure...
Yeah, I mean, there's some moving parts in some of the multiplayer we've seen in the last couple of years. I mean, Gears of War Judgment had the moving gondola, and there is...
Some, like, Razor Rain.
Yeah, and there's some dynamic stuff in some of the Black Ops maps, but not like what we've wanted. Like when we heard about Aftermath for Battlefield, we thought, oh man, earthquakes, does that mean that a building's going to come down partway through a map or partway through a match?
It pretty much just meant your screen vibrated.
Yeah, and utilize that wonderful rumble feature we like so much.
I mean,
the controller shakes.
Yeah, it was fun, but it wasn't only novel. It wasn't actually innovative. Or like on Caspian Border with the tower falling down, it happened at the end of the match. It happened scripted, and it was like off to the left, and it was pretty hard to get hit by that thing unless you're, not paying attention.
Yeah.
Just, it was like an idea that never really got followed through on. So yeah, dynamic maps was probably the best thing that came out of this press conference, I think.
Yeah, if they deliver on that promise, then the next Call of Duty multiplayer should be pretty cool.
We also saw shots in single player of a dam breaking that was flooding a level. We saw that in Call of Duty Black Ops 2 on one of the missions, which is cool because, again, like there's cars floating down the street. You're not talking about just walking down like, a dusty Middle Eastern setting, which has just been played to death in this generation. We saw lush forests and other environments that can change tactical gameplay, by obscuring enemy forces or giving you certain cover points. Hopefully, I don't know, maybe you could destroy the trees like you could in Bad Company. We saw a lot of generic, boring faces. I'd put that in the cons.
Yeah, those weren't very inspiring. I mean, they did their sort of graphics comparison between Modern Warfare 3 and Ghosts, and I mean, considering what they rolled out in I forget who it was that rolled out the old dude in the PS4 announcement, who looked freaking photorealistic.
Awesome old dude face.
Yeah.
I gotta say, this generation doesn't seem to be focusing on graphics as much as previous generations, and so because of that, we saw things. Well, okay, so in this presentation, they're like, "Oh, look how bloody this guy's knuckles are." But like, to be honest, I would rather them take the time and budget they put into Bloody Knuckles into more multiplayer maps, or
we're always saying that.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, how many Bloody Knuckles are you gonna look at? If you're gonna focus on graphics, I'm not super worried about that type of stuff. I'm more worried about things that you put in the game that tactically affect maps.
I think it's funny that they called attention to it, but I don't know if I have much of a problem with it, because every once in a while, like, I go back and play, like, Bad Company 2, and I look at my hands as I'm aiming, and I'm like, wow, they don't look very good. I admit that I've paid attention to that before. So
changing gears, it looks like Kinect's getting a little bit better. It's, I think it's a pretty nifty piece of technology, but in terms of games, they're saying it can now read forces better, but it also said when you're working out, it can track your heart rate, which kind of piqued my interest for a game like Sniper Ghost Warrior.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it could read your heart rate while you're standing still. They specifically only mentioned while you're moving.
Yeah.
But that being the case, it could be very interesting for a sniping type game for it to take your heart rate into account.
Oh, actually, I think it would be really cool to have, like we've been dealing with scope sway in shooters for a very long time. If the game was able to actually have something to do with like your heart rate when you're playing the game, it'd actually be kind of cool. So instead of having like an artificial built-in sway, it'd actually be based on like your in-game character's movement, but also your own personal state of being. Like if you've just been like shot at by an enemy tank and you're taking cover and everything's going off the hook, you're like, yeah, I can't actually aim that well right now because I'm not calm.
Yeah.
It's not that in the game, excited. Like I am in real life not calm.
Yeah. Again, these are things that developers could potentially take advantage of. That's not to say that they will.
Yeah.
For example, I think that Kinect was never properly grasped for things like shooters. I was kind of disappointed they never used it for just mild head tracking.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, when you're flying a helicopter in Battlefield, tilting your head slightly to the left or the right, like the Track IR did,
right,
would allow you to look out the cockpit without actually using your controller. That's something I would like to see Kinect used for, but for the most part, like the voice commands in Mass Effect and those sorts of things were not very useful. They didn't do anything better than the buttons on the controller actually did.
You could order people around faster with the buttons.
So I would put Kinect integration into this generation of shooters as just sort of iffy right now.
Yeah.
It's kind of undetermined whether...
Remains to be seen.
Yeah. Let's go into the negative side of this. No backwards compatibility for past games.
That's a big drawback.
So here's where this becomes a huge problem. So the Xbox One, they said, is going to launch later this year. They haven't given us a specific date.
Right.
Battlefield 4 has a specific date already, October 29th. And, Call of Duty Ghosts, they said November 5th.
Right.
So that means that if the Xbox One does not launch between October and November, or before that those games you're going to have to either not play until the Xbox One comes out or purchase on current generation. If you purchase it on current generation and the Xbox One comes out after those dates, you're going to have to buy the game twice.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah. So, again, Microsoft is going to have to, they're going to have to, I don't know, like I'm going to say they're going to have to launch this thing around Battlefield 4 and Call of Duty Ghosts, because otherwise, like, gamers aren't going to want to purchase the game twice.
I would definitely not want to purchase the game twice. And honestly, for that matter, any game twice. The idea of it not being backwards compatible is so frustrating to me because, for generations we've had to buy new consoles, and we just finally, in the past couple have had good backwards compatibility. But the thing is that we still weren't carrying over our save games. It's like, yeah, you could load the disc, but it's like, well, whatever, I can't get my save games. Now they actually have the technology to do that, and they're completely sidestepping it.
Yeah, I'm definitely concerned about lack of backwards compatibility. It won't be a problem down the line, but during the initial phase where things are transitioning, as we said, it's not going to be the Xbox One. It's just going to be the Xbox One of like 3 or 4 things now in your entertainment center. The other thing is they talked a lot about exclusives. I think they said there's going to be 15 exclusives on the Xbox One. I do not like exclusives. I think that they're bad for gamers. I think that they're good for the companies who are making games, potentially, just in terms of their financial transactions. But when you have exclusive titles, I've always wanted to play the Uncharted series, but I am never going to buy a couple $100 piece of hardware known as the PlayStation 3.
Yeah, just to play that
play that game. So when you have all these exclusives, then you segment the gaming population. A lot of times you'll delay it for the PC crowd, which just sucks because the PC crowd are just as loyal as any audience. And, a lot of times these exclusive titles won't even drop on PC at all.
Right.
I think exclusives are bad for gamers. I really do not like them, and I'm not looking forward to them.
I mean, it's hard for me to say precisely. I agree that, it would be nice if everything was available on everything. But I would also say that if it was the difference between a game getting made and not getting made, then I would swing in the other direction.
But I still think a game like Starhawk got screwed over by being exclusive on the PlayStation 3.
Yeah.
Starhawk's build and battle system, I think, would have gelled with the PC audience really well. And I think that studio ended up, turning to mobile games because it was an exclusive title. So maybe, I don't even know if exclusive games are great for publishers. It's kind of a big risk.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear from, the Halo people.
Yeah.
And from, Gears of War and Uncharted. It's like, did it work out really well for Epic that Gears of War is only on Xbox?
Well, I think financially for them it worked out well. The really popular titles it's worked well for.
Right.
But, if you're trying to get a new franchise launched, it's probably going to hurt you.
That's probably true.
All right, Ryan, so we'll close this thing out. In conclusion, how did you feel about the Xbox One press conference overall, coming from the, hardcore shooter perspective?
Well, I'd say I wasn't overly blown away, but I think that sort of got something to do with, as we've talked about, sort of just the lack of games. We only saw Call of Duty, and it's a big franchise, of course, but I'm going to sort of hold judgment until E3.
Yeah, Battlefield 4 basically dropped an announcement right after the press conference. Please pay us your pre-order monies, and then wait till E3 for us to tell you about our game. So, I think in general, this press conference, it's a little bit weird that it happened now, and then they're pretty much like, come back in a couple of weeks if you want to know anything about video games.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a weird tease. Although, I have to say, I don't mind that, Xbox, we're seeing a divergence. We're seeing that Sony is placing its emphasis on gaming and the, sort of getting like the indie developers interested. And Xbox is going in a direction of this is going to be your go-to for home entertainment system. And it's also for gaming. And it's two different philosophies. And, I guess I'm kind of glad to see that, in a sense, they're not going to be fighting each other quite so much.
Xbox is going to be fighting to penetrate your living room.
Yes. But I'm also glad that, if that's part of how they want to sell their system, that they're actually making that statement now, and then we can focus on the games at E3.
Yeah, I think this press conference was pretty much a confirmation for hardcore gamers that it's not about you. It's about an entire media experience, and you are one of the people that we are catering to, but by far you are not the only person we're catering to.
And you know what, in all fairness, it's like, as much from the hardcore gaming side, it's kind of a disappointment, but to also be fair, that does mean that there will be more people getting into gaming as a result. It's like, you have a Kinect and you have a family, you might be the hardcore gamer, but you're your kids or your wife, whatever, they're going to be using it as well to watch TV or whatever, and they're going to be that much closer to the games.
Although now I'm going to have to like throw out my copy of Connectables because there's no backwards compatibility. But yeah.
Son of a bitch.
I can't blame them for making this business decision to become more of a media console that also plays games.
Yeah.
But you know, the PlayStation 2 had it for 10 years. They had hardcore gamers for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And Xbox, I think, had it for maybe the last, 8 years now?
Yeah.
They had this last generation. I think the PlayStation 4 has the opportunity to sort of retake the lead for gamers. And Microsoft is taking a risk by not targeting gamers. They may end up selling more consoles to put in people's living rooms. But in terms of what's best for shooter fans and for gamers, right now, I feel like the PlayStation 4 is targeting, targeting us a little bit more thoroughly than the Xbox One.
And to be fair, it's not altogether that surprising when you look at the business that those parent companies are.
Yeah.
Sony is gonna, Sony is gonna stick more with gaming because they sell the hardware and the peripherals that go with that. They want to sell you the television, they want to sell you the speakers, they want to sell you the whole gaming experience. And on the other side, you have Microsoft, which is trying to sell you phones and tablets, and they want to integrate those devices and have your digital experience overall be integrated. So they're definitely coming from different directions of what the peripherals are that they're trying to sell you.
All right, hardcore shooter fans and gamers of old. Now that you've seen the Xbox One press conference, the PlayStation 4 press conference, and we are coming up on E3 where I'm sure people will actually talk about games, what do you guys think about the next generation consoles? Are you already leaning towards one or the other? Do you have fond memories of the PlayStation 2 and the Xbox 360 and are conflicted like some of us are?
Yeah, throw in your vote on our Twitter war.
For continuing coverage of the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, as well as upcoming coverage of E3, head on over to GameSpot.com, subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, and as always, we love to hear your comments, so definitely join into the conversation. Well, that's all for what the Xbox One press conference had for shooter fans and hardcore gamers. I'm Aaron Sampson.
I'm Ryan Schubert.
And we'll see you on the 1 or the 4. No, that just sounds weird.
I kind of like it.